The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and polished smiles, where power and privilege mingled like champagne. Among them stood David Cole, a self-made black CEO, invited as the guest of honor for a billion-dollar partnership. But celebration turned into humiliation in a heartbeat. A glass of red wine spilled, not by accident, but by arrogance. The crowd went silent. Laughter whispered. He stood frozen, not from shock, but from recognition. He'd seen this before. What happens when quiet dignity meets public disgrace? Watch until the end. Wait a second. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. David Cole wasn't born into wealth. He built his empire from scratch, coding out of his tiny apartment, fueled by resilience and rejection. Years later, he led Cole Dynamics, a global tech firm that rivaled giants. The gala that night celebrated a historic $1.5 billion merger, a partnership meant to redefine innovation. The host, billionaire Richard Langford, heir to one of the largest conglomerates in America. David had been invited not as a token, but as an equal, or so he believed. The room overflowed with luxury, silk gowns, gold watches, and false smiles. David moved with quiet grace, his presence commanding yet humble. But as he lifted his glass in a toast, he caught the disapproving glare of Langford's wife, Eleanor. It was subtle but piercing, the kind that measured his skin before his success. Something told him the night was far from over. Dinner passed with conversation coated in politeness and power games. David answered questions about his company, his strategies, and his inspirational journey. Yet every word he spoke seemed to be weighed, tested, and dissected. He'd grown used to that. But Eleanor's smirk across the table was different, a blend of superiority and discomfort. When the speeches ended, guests drifted toward the open bar. Eleanor approached him, glass in hand, voice dripping with mock charm. "You've done remarkably well, considering where you must have started." The statement sliced through the air, disguised as admiration. David smiled, the kind that said he'd heard worse. Moments later, as photographers gathered near, she stumbled forward, or pretended to. Crimson wine splashed across his tailored white suit, cascading like blood. Gasps followed. Someone laughed nervously. "Oh dear," she said. "I hope that wasn't too expensive." The room froze. David's assistant rushed over, but he lifted his hand, stopping her. He stood tall, stained but unbroken, his silence louder than outrage. Cameras clicked. Richard Langford's face tightened, torn between embarrassment and denial. David's mind replayed years of subtle humiliations. The boardrooms where his ideas were ignored until others repeated them, the polite racism dressed in compliments. But this was different. This was a message, one that demanded an answer. The next morning, the news broke. Black CEO humiliated at billionaire gala. The photo of the red stain went viral, sparking outrage and debate. Eleanor called it a clumsy accident. David said nothing publicly, but behind the scenes his lawyers were quiet no longer. His team reviewed every clause of the pending $1.5 billion merger. Days later, Langford received the message. Cole Dynamics has withdrawn from the partnership. At a press conference, David appeared calm, poised, and smiling once more. Reporters pressed for details. His words were simple. "Respect is priceless, and I don't do business where dignity is negotiable." Silence filled the room. Somewhere, Eleanor's smirk vanished. One act of arrogance had cost them billions, and exposed the truth that money could no longer hide. Weeks later, David's company partnered with another firm, one that valued diversity, respect, and integrity over legacy names. The canceled deal became a symbol in corporate America, proof that racism, even disguised in silk and wealth, still carried consequences. Eleanor's apology came too late, issued through press statements and polished regret. But David didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence had already spoken louder than any confrontation. That red stain became a reminder, not of shame, but of strength, of how one man's composure dismantled an empire built on entitlement. In a world obsessed with status, he proved that true power lies in self-respect. How many more silent humiliations will it take before the world learns? Dignity isn't for sale. Which country and city are you watching from? Take care.